We're going to start this session by hearing from Sami Wakba, our World Bank Global Director for Urban Disaster Risk Management and Land Global Practice, as well as Jerry Muscat from the European Investment Bank, to hear from the IFI perspective. We will then hopefully hear from Vera Rodenhoff from the German Ministry of Environment, who will share, yes, she's nodding, thank you, her donor's perspective. And then we will hear also from Asma Gina, who represents the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And she will share the perspective of a partner of the initiative, but also a partner of cities. And then we're delighted to have with us today the Mayor of Pristina, Shupend Ameti, as well as the Vice Mayor of Fez, Mr. Omar Fassi Firi, to provide the perspective from cities that are involved in the GAP Fund activities. And then finally, we have the pleasure of hearing from our Regional Director for Sustainable Development, Anna Wellenstein, and she will aim to draw some conclusions and provide some closing remarks. So time is tight and we have a lot to get through. So I may interrupt you if we need to move on the agenda. I apologize in advance. And we do have French and English interpretation. So if you need that, there's a button at the bottom of your screen showing interpretation, English or French. And the Vice Mayor of Fez will give his presentation in French. So let's get started, and over to you, Sami, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thanks to the GAP Fund team for creating this opportunity for us to discuss the role of cities in addressing climate change and how the City Climate Finance GAP Fund can help cities turn their climate ambitions into projects ready for financing and implementation. A particularly warm welcome to all participants, especially our guests representing the GAP Fund donors, partners, beneficiaries. Now, at the World Bank, alleviating poverty and tackling inequality and addressing climate change are all mission critical for us. This is why, in consultation with our board, we are finalizing a new climate change action plan. Now, in this action plan, we're aligning our financing with the goals of the Paris Agreement, and we are increasing our overall climate finance. So going forward, 35% of all World Bank Group financing will have climate co-benefits. That's up from 28% in our previous plan. And half of all our climate financing will go towards adaptation. In the new climate change action plan, we've identified 5 systems for reducing emissions and limiting the worst impact of climate change. Cities are one of those systems, alongside also energy, food, transport, and manufacturing. Now, these are the economic systems where green transitions hold the greatest potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and unlocking major economic opportunities for countries at all stages of development. Today, cities already consume over 2/3 of the world's energy and account for over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions from final energy use. And as the world continues to urbanize, how cities are built and managed will be a key determinant to the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, we're committed to supporting cities' transition towards low carbon, climate resilient urban development, and to help national and local governments develop, finance, and implement climate solutions. But until now, the chronic lack of capacity for early stage project preparation has slowed this transition. And this is why the City Climate Finance GAP Fund has its raison d'etre and where it comes in. It provides critical technical assistance and investment to support cities' transition to low carbon pathways and improve their climate resilience. 9 cities have received a first round of GAP Fund grants this year. And our session this morning will showcase several promising examples from this first cohort. So I'm excited to share the stage with representatives from BMU, our implementing partner, the European Investment Bank, GCOM, and particularly with the Mayor of Pristina and the Vice Mayor of Fez representing their cities, which are amongst the first recipients of GAP Fund grants. So thank you, and I very much look forward to hearing from the panelists. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Sami, very much. Let's pass directly to Jerry Muscat from the European Investment Bank. Jerry, please.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you to Sami as well. The EIB has recently become Europe's climate bank. So for us, climate is clearly a critical priority, and something like a third of all our lending goes to urban investment. So if you mix the two, the GAP Fund is clearly a very important priority for us in being able to, let's say, help unlock climate smart investment in cities. And I'm very pleased to note that the City Climate GAP Fund, it's been officially launched last September. And even though it's only a few months in, we're now fully operational. We've, in the GAP Fund, received overall about 100 expressions of interest for technical assistance from cities, local authorities, and other entities. And they're very diverse. They're diverse both geographically as well as covering all areas of urban development. So some of the ones we've been looking at recently cover water, urban mobility, energy efficiency, renewables, nature-based solutions. So as Samir was saying, the GAP Fund is a joint EIB and World Bank initiative, and it requires strong collaboration and constant communication between the teams at the EIB and the World Bank. And I think that that's actually proving to be quite effective. We have an agile and structured collaboration mechanism, and it seems to be working well so far. So we're very happy with this collaboration with our World Bank colleagues, and the teams are holding bi-monthly calls to discuss the expressions of interest that come in, and to check which ones are eligible and which of the two secretariats should follow up with the different cities. We also have joint communications, and I think recently there's been webinars across different continents in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and over 200 attendees joining them. So we're also starting to help get the message out that the GAP Fund is fully operational, and this event will obviously help to do the same. With the EIB contribution to the GAP Fund, we're collaborating very closely with GIZ, the German Technical Assistance Agency. And we have a secretariat here at the EIB with GIZ, which is already up and running and functioning, and obviously backed up by the wider EIB and GIZ resources and external consultants. And I'd especially like to thank the donors, especially Germany's BMU and the Luxembourg Ministry of Environment, for their financial support, which has made this possible. And in addition to the EIB, GIZ, and World Bank, the collaboration is also with the partners, wider partners, particularly the Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLE, C40, and the Climate City Finance Leadership Alliance, which is really essential to ensure the success of the GAP Fund, both to spreading the word about the GAP Fund, supporting cities in applying, finding other channels if the GAP Fund isn't suitable, and ensuring continuity with other project preparation facilities after the GAP Fund has intervened. So to conclude my intervention, I'd just like to say that I think the GAP Fund really is innovative. It's both filling a gap in supporting the early stages of climate smart project preparation in cities. It's innovative in its delivery approach, coordinated between the World Bank and the GIZ EIB teams. And it's also innovative in a strong partnership with the city networks, which will ensure that the outputs of the GAP Fund can feed well into the next stages of project preparation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of this event.
Thank you, Jerry. And it's great to hear from Sami and Jerry about the high priority of city climate finance amongst the EIB and the World Bank, and also the high demand, as you mentioned, Jerry, for this type of support from cities. So we love to hear from the German Ministry of Environment. Vera, would you like to come in and share from your perspective? Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for organizing this event, colleagues, friends, mayors. Great to see you again on this call. It's been a while since we've seen each other on the screen. I take this opportunity to make a brief update. You might have heard of a landmark decision in our constitutional court in Germany, where we had a few youth that had a suit due to the climate crisis. And the court confirmed the objective of having to reach 1.5 degrees, something we've as a government have always strived to achieve, but we didn't have any medium-term targets. And so in the vein of that, we have recently updated our net zero goal commitment from 2050 and put it forward to 2045. So the urgency of the climate crisis in Germany is in all the parties' sort of notebooks, and in the run-up to the elections, a lot is going on in this country. And to achieve that, we are convinced that we need the cities to achieve that, because they are the decisive actors for helping us to achieve staying below 1.5 degrees. And we think that there is a real opportunity there. And we've seen also that cities have been at the forefront of the COVID crisis. They are in the line of defense, and they have also mobilized unprecedented levels of public financing to respond not only to the environmental and climate challenges, but also to the health, social and economic challenges. So, and the the green recovery plans in our country, but also in many other countries, of course, are a clear opportunity to do something about this. There are big sums of investments foreseen. Not all of them are going to the cities, but investing in cities and investing in climate-friendly urban infrastructure is key here. And it's not only about the climate, it's also about the co-benefits. And I will not list them all here, because I know that most of the colleagues online here know about these. Our stimulus packages take cities into account in Germany and the EU. A third of Germany's ambitious stimulus package of a total of 130 billion euros allocate to sustainable investments in clean technologies. And this includes 100 million euros for recovery programs, for climate measures in cities and municipalities. However, of the $20.5 trillion pledged globally for the COVID-19 recovery, little more than 5%, and that is $1.1 trillion, have been allocated to cities, according to a report by the CCFLA. So more finance needs to go to cities, not only in COVID recovery, but especially for climate. In general, though, so the challenge remains that cities and local governments do not have the critical resources and the capacity to achieve their climate goals. Only 2.5% of total adaptation finance go to urban projects. Also, as this is estimated by the CCFLA as well. And one key reason why cities lack sufficient financing is that they struggle to prepare the technical and financially viable and hence bankable infrastructure projects. And the early stage of project preparation is crucial to advance the project plans from an idea to a robust business case, but it is hugely lacking in support. And this is why, together with many colleagues around this virtual table today, and especially with the Global Covenant of Mayors, World Bank, EIB, and many others, we developed the City Climate Finance Gap Fund. And together with colleagues from Luxembourg, we are funding this fund. And this fund is also part of the LUCI, the Leadership for Urban Climate Investment Initiative that we launched at the United Nations Summit in 2019. And this initiative is hosted by the CCFLA. And this so-called GAP fund fills this critical gap of supporting cities in early project preparation. And I would like to extend again my great gratitude to everyone who supported us and who developed this initiative together. And of course, I'm very happy that it's hosted by the EIB and the World Bank today. And we are obviously, together with Luxembourg, also looking forward to have more donors donating money to the GAP Fund. And I'm sure this will come along. And I'm also sure that the GAP Fund will be one of the crucial instruments that actually helps streamline money from some of the recovery package and other investment packages to cities in a good way. Another key feature, and this I'm saying, even though there are not that many national governments around the table, is that the national framework conditions need to be right for this. So the GAP Fund is one aspect, the national framework conditions, also the regional framework conditions also need to be in place for the money that comes through these channels to fall on a fruitful ground. So our position is we are very happy that we have the GAP Fund. We are looking forward to more donors joining and to continue this effort together with everyone here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vera, and we thank you for your strong commitment and support to the GAP Fund. We heard that the climate crisis is high on the agenda and links to the green recovery and recovery packages, but yet the financing is still not following, and cities are still struggling with developing climate ready projects. So I think it would be good to hear from Asma, Gina from GCOM, who can bring that city perspective to the table. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Vera, for setting that up very well. And thank you for the opportunity to speak at this session today and to give you a little bit of a partner in a city's perspective. Some of you hopefully know the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, but just as a refresher, we're the largest global alliance for city climate leadership with a commitment of over 10,000 cities and local governments. And this spans 6 continents and 138 countries in total, representing more than 800 million people. So it's a pretty large alliance. And of course, cities and partners of GCOM share a long-term vision of supporting voluntary action to combat climate change. Of course, we recognize that there's no sustainable future without sustainable cities, and together we're working towards a resilient and low emission city. And of course, the GAP Fund is incredibly timely. So it's an initiative of GCOM and other partners, but it's incredibly timely. As we've heard, cities are both key contributors and drivers of climate change, with urban areas accounting for more than 70% of global energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. They're also at the forefront of coping with the economic impact of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis and leading efforts to build back better during the recovery. As such, efforts to address the combined challenges relies on cities and their capacities to innovate and take lead on local actions. And we know that cities are test beds and hubs of innovation, accounting for 80% of GDP and hosting 60% of the global population. Cities are absolutely at the forefront of this, and the Global Covenant of Mayors has initially done a lot of research and through its work with cities identified that there was, of course, a lack of bankable pipeline of projects, and it's the biggest, most significant barrier to private investment in climate smart infrastructure in emerging and developing markets. But of course, it's compounded by limited local capacity, as well as sort of access to financing and funding. So as an increasing number of cities have developed their climate action plans, and of course, as countries are establishing and tracking their own locally determined contributions, the GAP Fund is incredibly timely in making sure that we can bring technical assistance to support that very early stage feasibility, pre-feasibility, planning and coherence to ensure that there's a significant pipeline of high quality, low carbon, climate resilient infrastructure project ideas, which would otherwise not reach the stage of investment readiness and implementation. So GCOM has, of course, been a key partner in terms of this initiative. As I mentioned, conducting some of the research for this gap that exists for cities to move from planning to implementation, but it's also helped to structure this fund to be accessible to city and continues to provide outreach and capacity building support to help cities to apply. we're really excited by the 9 applications that have been announced, and we're really looking forward to future collaborations with our partners, our donors, and of course, our cities as well. And thanks again.
Thank you very much, Asma. And let's hear now the city perspective, as you mentioned. We have first the mayor of Pristina, I believe is here, Shepend Ameti. If you would like to come in to share your experience with the GAP Fund and also some of the constraints you have around financing climate smart investments in Pristina. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in this conference. I will try to keep it short just to explain the main challenges that we've had in the past. I mean, this is my second term as mayor, so I've been mayor for 8 years now. And Pristina is a city of about 350,000 people. Obviously the main challenge here has been the air quality. We are sitting basically in a valley. Pristina is surrounded by hills a little bit. So during the winter, what happens is that most of the particles that we release from cars and also from alternative heating methods by using coal, these particles, because of the high humidity and then also the, how to say, climate position of Kosovo, the country, are then becoming heavier and staying closer to the ground. And then we receive very high measurements in certain areas of the city from these parts. So we have identified, what we have done is that we have worked with experts and also with donors in trying to identify what are the main causes of basically the low air quality, and also what are the remedies to it, because during the winter everybody becomes an environmentalist in Kosovo, but then during the summer it is a little bit forgotten. So we try to use the situation during the winter to make the changes that are necessary. We have identified 2 main sources of what the challenges are, and because Kosovo is the 2nd largest reserve of coal, lignite, in 3rd largest reserve of lignite in Europe, it is very cheap here. And people who are not, who do not have, for example, don't have the, how to say, the district heating connection, and also think that electricity heating is too expensive, what they do is usually they don't even use wood, which has been for a long time the alternative source of heating. So what they're doing now is buying coal, which means that most of the individual housing that we have, especially in the poor neighborhoods, they use coal during the winter. So you can feel it immediately around 8 o'clock in the morning that the breathing becomes harder. And then also because we have a lot of traffic, I mean, compared to other capitals, not much higher. But the idea is that because we get a lot of old cars to import that we import from Europe, then what happens is that we notice it during the winter because of the climate situation or the climate position that we are in. So we have identified these 2 sources, and basically we have gone for a green agenda, signing both different agreements that we have with mayors around the world and in Europe, like the Compact of Mayors, to reduce the emissions. But also we have signed for the EBRD program, which is the Green City Action Plan. This is basically a long-term strategy with identifiable measurements, and then a list of policies that we do to reduce emissions and improve the air quality in long term. Obviously, politically, this is not something that you benefit from. So this is very important to highlight, especially working with cities, because most of the terms of mayors are 4 years. And at the same time, most of these policies that we are talking about are longer than 4 years in terms of project implementation, and especially more than 4 years in terms of, how to say, measurable changes, positive, that can be attributed to a single politician or to someone who's running the city. So starting from increasing the green areas, we are now working basically in 2 directions. One is to make it more difficult and more expensive for cars. So in a way, a very unpopular policy, which is to declare war on cars by closing some cities in the center of the city, some roads in the center of the city, but also making it more expensive to park in the center of the city, therefore providing a disincentive for cars to enter the city. And second, very soon in October, probably we're going to implement a congestion charge that we will do with static cameras in the entrance of the city. So whoever wants to come by car in the city, it should become more expensive. I say very unpopular because especially in places like ours, where we have a very low income, low economy, there is this strange attitude towards cars where most of the people, even in the lowest levels of income, economic situation, they still use at least one car for them. Actually, according to the latest statistics that we have from the Statistical Agency of Kosovo, people here spend more on their cars than on their children's education. And this is not something that you do. It does not just take like a specific policy to ban it. It is a change of habit or a change of approach, which is much more difficult to do in politics, which means that you have to change people's behavior. And especially in a situation like this, we have people like who are during the winter environmentalists, but at the same time, they have like 3 cars registered to one house. And the second measure that for the cars, we have bought new buses. Basically, 3 years ago, we've taken a loan from EBRD. We bought 51 new buses. We're changing public transportation. During the pandemic, we also made it for free. That is our goal, that in 2 or 3 years, we make public transportation fully free. By the end of the year, we're buying another 30 buses, and 8 of them will be electric buses, because we are piloting the electric buses, although it is much more expensive, because not just the price of the bus is higher, but at the same time, where we need one bus, which is with CNG, compressed natural gas, we would need 2 electric buses, because while one is on the road, the other is being charged. But I think that, we have to spend more in order to reduce the cost, the health costs associated with air pollution. If it costs us 10 million a year to make public transportation free, I think it is basically, when you do the math, it is much cheaper than spending more than 10 million in health costs during the winter because of respiratory diseases that people have. And never do they attribute this to pollution. They usually say, oh, it's a normal flu. It's during the winter, it's cold, it's normal to have it now. So what we're doing for traffic is we're reducing the traffic in the city. We're increasing the investment in public transportation. We're testing electric buses. We're working on a network of chargers to incentivize also the usage of hybrid and also electric cars, with the idea that in about 4 to 6 years, we would have a much lower level of emissions from cars. On the second, on the coal usage, we've spent also a lot of money. The idea was that there are a lot of individual houses in poor neighborhoods that use coal, as I explained, because it's very cheap. Now, the government here has introduced a simple ban. They said, don't use coal. But that is not enough, because you have to first understand why people use coal. So you cannot just ban it when you know that the reason for using coal is economic. So if someone is on social assistance and they cannot afford electricity, or they cannot afford other sources of heating, then it is very difficult to tell them just don't use coal, which is about €2 a bag, because these are also neighborhoods with a lower level of education. So it means that there is not a very high awareness for climate, for air quality. What they want is basically a heated home. So what we focused on is affordable district heating, which is, we've invested more than 50 million euros in the past 6 years in order to make district heating cheaper. And we've done what we call cogeneration, which is we use the heat already created in the power plant. By sending cold water, we just heat the water as I said, with the heat already being used there. And this, we have now realized it's very cheap. Actually, it could be even cheaper than coal. 60,000 people are connected. I think 90,000 people are connected. By the end of this year, we will have about 120,000 people connected. But now the challenge remains on what to do with individual houses. So what we've done is we have worked with the German government, and we are going to do a solar panel district heating. It's going to be the second biggest in Europe after Denmark, where we will connect all these neighborhoods that have individual houses to that district heating, with the goal that in about 2025, all of our cities connected to district heating, with the idea that then coal banning would be implementable because you already have something to offer to people. When you add to this an efficiency loan to change all the, to renovate all the schools that we have in our city, all the health houses, with all these concepts that we have, I think that the plan with the Green City Action Plan, in about 5 years, it will improve drastically the situation that we have in the city. Now, where does the GAP fund come in? Well, for most of these things that I already spoke about and that we are going to talk about, because we're working on other things as well, is that we lack the capacity to analyze, research, and recommend changes that actually work. And it's not that we just don't have the money, because obviously the municipalities in Pristina are not the richest one. But at the same time, I would say that because we've spent so much money on this green agenda, we also could have money for research. But what helps us is if we partner with an institution that is big, has the expertise, then apart from the fact that we get the funding, we also get somehow the, how to say, the credibility, because as I explained at the beginning, most of these policies are not popular. You don't get votes with this, you actually lose votes. And people sometimes, they don't, when you say as a municipality alone, they would say, oh, this is done for funding reasons. Like when we make expensive parking, people think that it's because of the funding for the city. And partnering like this with the GAP fund actually makes it much easier in order to meet the climate, how to say, obstacles, challenges that we have. I always say that Pristina is a small city, like 350,000 is one of the smallest capitals in Europe. But no city is small enough to not make an impact. And I think the future of fighting against this climate challenges is at the municipal level. This is the front line. Yes, governments do a lot, but when we talk about the living conditions, when we talk about the choices of people where to live, when we talk about schools, when we talk about which road to take, where they're going to park their car, district heating, these are all municipal challenges. I think this is one of the, so, you know, to actually summarize it, I don't think the GAP fund should be seen only as a financing gap. I think it should be seen also as an expertise gap. Sometimes the expertise is worth, in terms of money, much more than the actual fund that we get. You know, I used to work for the World Bank for 3 years. I was an economist. And, you know, one of the things that I would say also is that the city needs to know what it wants. We were asking once a very famous Yugoslav ex-president, they asked him, what do you think about the World Bank? And he said, if you don't know what you want, it's the worst organization in the world. If you know what you want, it is the best organization in the world. So for cities that are on a green agenda, that are trying to meet the challenges, that are not running just for votes, I think an instrument like this is very valuable, because you ask for the things that you need, you ask for the things that you are missing, where you have a gap, and at the same time you gain the credibility that you need in order to change people's behaviors, because at the end, this is not just economics, it's behavioral economics. It's making people change their habits, is making them not use their car when they go at work in the morning, you know, making them not use the coal for heating. And this requires not just a government decision or a municipal decision. It takes a reasoning, discussion, analysis, and conclusion as to why this is required for us to have a better life. I will conclude by saying that we just finalized a study with the Dartmouth University where we tried to analyze the costs, the health costs associated with air pollution. As I said, not a lot of people know that they're spending more out of their pockets in health expenditures because of these climate changes than they, would think about as a parking cost or something else. So at the end of the day, for us, it will be cheaper and our lives will improve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I think your case directly demonstrated what Vera was talking about, co-benefits, the benefits of reducing air pollution, providing better services in the city. But also you mentioned the transition challenges, especially transition away from coal and the impacts on the poor, but also the importance of both behavior change and providing the affordable alternatives for public transport and district heating, as well as the political challenges of this green transition very clearly. So thank you very much, Mayor. And I look forward to hearing from Omar Fassi from Fez, from their experiences too. Thank you very much. Please, over to you, Mayor from Fez. Thank you.
Je voulais vous parler, merci beaucoup pour cette opportunité. Donc, je voudrais vous parler de la vision pour le climat au niveau de la ville de Fès. Je vais vous parler de nos défis, nos ambitions et comme vous savez, le grand challenge de villes comme Fès, c'est qu'elle est située dans une zone de transition climatique. Et donc la difficulté, c'est qu'on est touché de plein fouet par le changement climatique. Et avant de vous parler de débit, de défis, d'ambition et puis d'attente, je vais vous parler déjà de préalables. Deux en particulier. Un diagnostic concerté et un cadre stratégique de développement qui est une vision partagée par tout le monde. Alors, le diagnostic, nous l'avons fait avec les élus, les représentants de la société civile, je vais essayer. OK. OK. Je vais essayer. Exactement. Donc, vous m'entendez là? Parfait. Donc, l'idée fondamentale, c'est de dire, nous avons une vision pour la ville qui a été concertée et qui va utiliser donc une vision globale axée sur une métropole attractive, compétitive, inclusive, innovante et durable. Donc, c'est traduit en 5 axes stratégiques que sont donc l'attractivité de la ville, l'équilibre et l'inclusion sociale, la compétitivité économique, donc la durabilité de la ville et l'axe gouvernance. Ça nous ramène à parler des défis qui sont lancés par les changements climatiques et qui sont spécialement orientés par la gestion d'un patrimoine d'humanité qui est situé dans la zone de transition climatique, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure. donc 2 volets, un volet adaptation et un volet atténuation. Sur le plan adaptation, donc, nous avons 4 défis majeurs que sont la lutte contre les inondations, l'entretien des espaces verts, le fonctionnement des piscines et la gestion optimale des eaux. Sur le plan atténuation, nous avons aussi 4 défis prioritaires. La gestion intégrée des déchets avec un centre d'enfouissement que nous avons et sur lequel nous avons intégré une unité de production d'énergie électrique, donc pour éviter tous les effets de serre des gaz qui en émanent. L'optimisation de l'éclairage public parce qu'il consomme beaucoup d'électricité. L'organisation du stationnement parce que c'est une, comme a dit monsieur le maire de Pristina tout à l'heure, c'est un axe fondamental pour nous. Et l'amélioration du transport urbain, qui est aussi un axe majeur. Alors, nos ambitions, je vais en citer 2. Continuer à améliorer cette vision avec l'étude du plan d'action climat, donc, et toutes les études de résilience urbaine que nous avons entamées, notamment avec la Banque mondiale, et qui a sorti des axes fondamentaux, donc par exemple la lutte contre les inondations. Et le grand problème, nous l'avons entamé, en tout cas nous avons entamé sa résolution. Nous avons lancé des marchés après les études détaillées pour lutter contre les inondations. Et en plus, nous avons le plan de déplacement urbain, le plan d'aménagement, le schéma directeur d'aménagement urbain, etc. Donc, toutes ces études, ils ont besoin d'être complémentarisées avec un plan d'action climat qui va nous faire sortir une vision globale de toutes ces actions que nous avons entamées. Nous avons entamé la réflexion, il faudrait continuer pour les concrétiser. Justement, c'est l'axe, le deuxième axe de cette vision. Donc, concrétiser en réalisant des projets, toutes les levées de fonds, les études, l'appropriation des intéressés, les travaux, l'évaluation, l'impact sur la population. Et pour ça, nous avons des attentes de ce fonds qui sont particulièrement intéressants sur 4 volets pour arriver à un objectif commun qui est aller plus loin dans l'opérationnalisation de cette vision en matière de lutte contre les effets indésirables du changement climatique. Donc, 3 volets d'aide attendus. Déployer les outils dynamiques pour l'actualisation du diagnostic que j'avais cité tout à l'heure, de la planification, de la priorisation des actions en faveur du climat. Ça, c'est le premier volet. Le deuxième volet, c'est l'élaboration d'un plan d'action climat avec la priorité de la réflexion sur la résilience urbaine et l'intégration du local, du régional et du national. Le troisième volet qui est attendu, c'est de renforcer les capacités au niveau local en matière de planification des actions climat, notamment l'appui régulier de nos cadres, le transfert d'expertise, la dynamique collaborative, la gestion de projets climat. C'est autant d'innovations qui nécessitent beaucoup de contributions et de renforcement de capacités. Voilà, enfin, je conclurai pour dire que la ville de Fès, pour nous, l'objectif, c'est l'implémentation de cette vision climat et qui doit passer par l'élaboration d'un plan d'action climat d'abord. Comme a dit monsieur le maire de Pristina, nous avons besoin justement de cette expertise, notamment pour l'intégration des différents aspects, qui soient techniques, financiers, etc. La concertation et l'accompagnement de tous nos partenaires avec leur appropriation, la concrétisation avec la contractualisation, comme ce que nous avons fait dans la dynamique de l'étude de résilience urbaine. Et enfin, cette responsabilité de concrétiser les projets efficients, efficaces, qui nécessitent justement d'aller de l'avant pour concrétiser toutes les attentes d'une ville de plus d'1 million d'habitants dans une région qui est la capitale d'une région de plus de 4 millions d'habitants. Je vous remercie et je suis prêt à discuter avec vous vos différentes interrogations par la suite. Merci, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Mayor Firi, and also to Mayor Ameti for your time today. I know, as you mentioned, you're really working at the coal face, literally, so we know that time is precious and we appreciate you taking the time today. And we also heard great expectations for the GAP Fund, not just for the financing, but for the technical gap and expertise that it brings. So we very much look forward to working with you, and I will pass directly to our Senior Director for Sustainable Development, Anna Wellenstein, for closing remarks. And we have a few additional minutes. So look forward to hear from you, Anna. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Joanna. And it's such a pleasure to be here. What a great way to start the day in DC is to hear all the great ambitions of our partners, as well as the front lines, what some key cities are doing on climate. So I want to thank you for sharing that. Thank all the panelists. It's certainly been motivational for me, and I hope for all of our guests here this morning. So first, we heard from Sam and Jerry that gave us a perspective of the implementing agencies. Vera shared with us the donor's perspective and also background on how we got to where we are, how the GAP Fund was shaped into the force that it is today. And Asma gave us the perspective of the city network partners. We heard from Pristina and Fez, two cities where we're seeing real change happen on the ground through collaborative action. They told us about the importance of a medium-term plan and integrated studies to understand what's happening and the challenges of these medium-term plans when the line of sight for a mayor and a city administration can be much more near term. We talked about behavioral change and really understanding what's driving some of the not climate friendly actions and getting at what those driving issues are. And we talked about, I thought interesting to look broadly at what going green and climate smart for a city means and adding up those costs and benefits, not looking in silos, and how that broader perspective can lead us to more sound and sustainable practices across the board. I want to share with you as well, take advantage of this stage to share with you a little what we're doing the World Bank in the Latin American Caribbean region on these issues, on climate change and our strategy more broadly. So globally, the Latin American Caribbean region contributes about 10% to GHG emissions, which isn't much for a whole region. We have two of the top 20 emitters in the region nonetheless, Mexico and Brazil, but they each contribute about 1.3% of global GHG emissions. We also know that at the same hand, the Latin America region is really vulnerable to climate change and variations in weather temperature and in disasters. We're seeing things like the reduction of fresh water, an intensification and more destructive hurricane season, decreasing of agricultural productivity, and agriculture is a huge deal for the economies of Latin America. And these are just a few examples. And the vulnerability that we're seeing is really dire for our small island states and the Caribbean. It's another example. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has recently come up with estimates that said extreme weather events for the small islands will double by 2050. And so anyone who's been in the region, you get ready for that hurricane season, these are really major impacts. So Latin American cities, to deal with the impacts of climate change, as well as limit their contributions to it, will have to transform. And to realize these transformational goals, as we heard from some of our city partners, planning becomes critical. And we're working to help support the cities of the region by launching a new city level capital investment planning program that can really help develop those projects that can be financed and that reflect a really changing landscape on global climate finance. So we've taken the first step. We've done a stock taking to understand where things stand on climate planning in the region. We've looked at 270 climate action plans, both at the city and national level, and we're moving forward with resilience efforts. So just a few examples. We're supporting governments to prepare transformative multi-sector investments for Latin American cities like the Ascension Riverfront Resilience Project, Bolivia Resilience Project, the Belo Horizonte in Brazil Reducing Flood Risk Project, where we're helping to make sure hundreds of families become protected from current floods that are coming every year and more intense. We're setting out as part of the new World Bank Climate Action Plan, the importance and the priority that we place on urban planning for resilience. Sami talked a little bit about this at the start of the session. And we're increasing our efforts on urban resilience in Latin America in places like thinking about how we deal with coastal cities that are highly vulnerable, or how we use new technologies to really identify vulnerable households. We're also working hard on the energy efficiency front. So taking projects like the urban renewal project in Buenos Aires, where with the housing we're going to finance through the project, we already incorporate new energy efficiency standards into that housing. So it's climate smart from the start. So these are ambitious goals that we have for the region. We really need to deliver on them. And in this context, the GAP Fund becomes critically important. We already have a few cities that are supported by the fund, and we're committed to increasing those numbers of cities that are engaged with the fund in this great partnership. So Tulum and San Cristobal in Mexico are two of the early recipients of the funds, and they're working on transformative urban regeneration projects that can be climate smart. The fund is also helping to look at the national level in Mexico, their national urban upgrading program, and building in resilience and adaptation measures into that national program. So we're excited to see these programs come alive and turn into impactful policies, programs, and projects. As we heard from all of our speakers today, cities are at the forefront of progress on climate change, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and on the forefront of COVID. So they need to be front and center in our efforts. We got wonderful examples here today, and just a few things that I think are important. I heard everyone say how the GAP Fund is important, but it's important in terms of the know-how that it brings, in terms of the financing, and in terms of the credibility. And I think that's all too true for Latin America as well as the other cases we heard. So thank you for the chance to do the wrap up on this great session. And thank you to everyone for joining virtually here today. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I hope we did the job in raising the profile of cities like Fez and Pristina, and also the cities that have been mentioned through the discussions in raising the profile of climate action at the subnational level, and the work of mayors Ameti and Firi are doing to raise climate change mitigation and adaptation in their cities. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. And thanks especially to Same, Jerry, Vera, Asma, Mayor Firi, and Mayor Ameti, and of course, Anna for being here, and for all the organizers. And if you'd like to hear more about the GAP Fund, you can visit our website. It's at www.gapfund.org. And please keep in touch. Thank you very much, everybody.